You are a doctor, obviously. You're an oncologist. Is that correct?
I am. I am an oncologist. I've been an oncologist for 25 years. I do cancer research as well.
And your whole life you've wanted to be a doctor?
My whole life, it was either that or a politician. So I decided that I didn't really want to go to law school, so I decided to go to medical school. No, I've always been exposed. My family, my father was in research. My mother was a psychologist. So I've always grown up around research and medicine. Yeah, it's been a long passion of mine.
And why did you want to be a doctor?
I think I wanted to really make a difference in people's lives. I wanted to, you know, when I went to college, I realized that medicine, this may sound like a cliche, but it really is the most noble profession, despite all that's happening in medicine. You know, you really get to know people at a level that you can't get to know in any other profession. I mean, when somebody's got, especially in oncology, when someone's got a life-threatening illness, it really strips away the veneer. So whether they're the richest person in the world or somebody found under a bridge, you know, they're still dealing with the same life and death issues. And so you get to know somebody in a way that you could never get to know them, you know, by being a lawyer.
And I would think that when it ties into Lyme disease, especially, which is why we're talking about this, what you just said really drives that home. I mean, to have a doctor that cares about you, to have a doctor that sort of understands you intuitively,
right,
to have a doctor who wants you to be on the same page as them,
right,
has to make all the difference in the world.
It's all the difference in the world. I mean, the doctor-patient relationship is all important. You know, despite, you know, and I have a laboratory and I'm involved in precision medicine, which uses all the, you know, the human genome and all the information to do cutting edge, and I've been involved in cutting edge research. Despite all of those advances, which are amazing, it still comes down to a physician and a person. Because if that person doesn't buy into their care and doesn't feel like they have an active role and doesn't feel like as a physician I'm listening to them, number one, they're not going to be compliant with any of the treatments, or they're less likely to be compliant, and they're going to have a lousy outcome. So you can't rely on, I think we've become so virtual medicine oriented and test oriented that we've forgotten that basic element of human to human contact is all important. I mean, having a doctor hug you is therapeutic.
Yeah.
So, you know, but we've forgotten that. And so, yeah, no, I think that especially for Lyme disease, a disease where, you know, where people often feel very isolated from the healthcare community, who may not believe that they're sick, often sadly isolated from their own families, who believe it's all in their head and they're, you know, they're faking it, or they, you know, they don't want to go back to work, when people are really suffering. So I think having a physician who understands, and I understand from a personal level, so it gives me
deeply
sort of that,
personal.
yeah, that sort of street credibility,
yeah,
that I understand what people are going through.
So how did the physician become the patient?
So I went from being, you know, this incredible model of health. I mean, I ran Boston marathons. I used to run 10 miles a day, 6 days a week. I did everything right. I mean, I didn't smoke. I, you know, had my glass of red wine every once in a while. And
which is good for you.
Which is good for you. It's good to have a glass of red wine every once in a while.
Right.
So, you know, and I wore the white coat. I figured I was immune to getting sick, right? I mean, I took care of people, not the other way around. So I got bit by, you know, a tick and never saw the tick, just like a lot of people with Lyme disease don't remember. The ticks are almost like a speck of dust. And then for 4 years, I had, so I went from running marathons and running an avid exerciser to literally within a span of months to barely being able to walk 20 yards without having to stop for extreme fatigue. So I knew something was wrong, and I was having arrhythmias, so my heart would start racing upwards of, you know, 100, 200, 180 beats a minute, when the normal heart rate is probably 70, for no reason at all. And as a physician, I knew this is not normal, there's something wrong. And yet every time I'd go to the doctor, they would run a slew of tests, never Lyme disease tests, and say, we can't find anything wrong with you. You know, the arrhythmias are very transient. I would make the analogy, it's like when you bring your car into the mechanic, and you say to the mechanic, oh, there's this noise, it's binging over here, and then the mechanic drives it, and of course the noise is gone.
Right.
And they just look at you like, there's nothing wrong with your car.
Yeah.
So the same thing, I would go, and every time I'd go to the emergency room, the arrhythmia would have resolved, and they would say, you know, you're a physician, you're
So you
writing
told them
grants.
that you were a physician. They knew that you...
They knew I was a
Were you
physician.
going to your hospital that where you were practicing or affiliated with?
I was going to the medical school that I was working at, and I had very compassionate physicians. I mean, don't get me wrong, but because they were so focused on the tests, and you know, my blood counts were normal, and my chemistries were normal, and again, by the time I would be seen, my EKG, the tracing of my heart rhythm would be normal, and they'd say, "You're stressed, right? You're trying to write a grant. You're writing grants for your lab. I was seeing very sick patients, bone marrow transplant patients at the time. You know, my wife and I were trying to start a family, which was very, you know, frustrating and challenging, sadly. So there were stresses, but I kept telling people, you know, I've been stressed in my life. I mean, as an intern and a medicine resident, I worked 120 hours a week before the days where they were restricted.
Right. What's more stressful than going through medical school in your residency?
Exactly. And I had never experienced the sorts of symptoms I was experiencing back from 1993, you know, through 97. So for 4 years, I went misdiagnosed as having a stress disorder. You know, people told me to do biofeedback, do meditation. I did all those things. They were great. I mean, but it didn't change. I mean, I was still incredibly fatigued. I had, you know, I had such strange symptoms that I don't think my doctors knew what to think about it. I mean, I had this burning sensation in my feet that was so bad that I had to prop my feet off the bed because otherwise it was like a searing, burning sensation. You know, I'd have these night terrors. I mean, when I mean night terrors, they weren't just nightmares. They were just horrendous.
Full-on sweats.
Yeah, they were things that woke me up. They were, you know, strange. I mean, strange for me. I had severe insomnia. Again, I knew myself, and this is like the message I had always told my patients, you know yourself better than any physician, whether they graduated from Harvard or Columbia or wherever. I mean, only you know yourself. So I knew myself, and I knew that these were very atypical for me, and there was something really wrong, but no one could figure it out.
So how did you get from a place where you knew that something was wrong to a diagnosis, a correct diagnosis? I'm sure there were many misdiagnoses.
Right. So what happened was after 4 years of, and literally, I knew I was dying. I mean, I really knew that I was going to die.
You didn't just feel you were dying.
No, I knew I was dying. I knew if I was a physician taking care of me, someone like me, I would have been preparing the family that this person, look at them. They've, you know, I'd lost weight. By the way, I was still working every day. So during this whole time, I was running my lab. I was seeing incredibly sick patients. But I knew that it wasn't going to last much longer unless somebody figured out. So in 1997, after 4 years of being told I was stressed, I developed what I think, that's really when the light bulb went on. So I developed arthritis, I mean really severe, like I could barely hold things in my hands, my wrists, my arms, and swollen joints. It wasn't just pain, there were swollen joints. And I was given an antibiotic for a completely independent reason, not for the arthritis. The antibiotic turned out to be doxycycline, which is the antibiotic that's given for people with Lyme disease. And my arthritis within 24 hours completely resolved. I mean, went away 100%. And it was around the same time that I developed, again, a telltale sign of Lyme disease, what they call third-degree heart block, which is not an actual blockage in the blood vessels, but it's the electrical wiring system in the heart that maintains our normal heart rate that we all take for granted. I mean, we don't